Namaste, namaste. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this live. Just wanted to talk a little bit today about spiritual self-realization, which is obviously my main focus in life, and the context that we find ourselves in the world, with lots of people self-isolating with the coronavirus and so forth. So, and obviously that can be and will be, no doubt, very challenging for many people who find themselves in positions where they don't feel that they can go out and socialize or do some of the normal things. Indeed, my own parents in the last few days have chosen to do that with the help of the family. Various arrangements have been put in place. And so obviously, love, care, connection, support, regular contact via other means is obviously fundamental in the human domain. And that's very, very important in such challenging times, of course. But I also wanted, having taken that as read, and obviously that's something that we need to remember, I also wanted to talk about this self-isolation with a small s and a small I, but also in a broader context of self-realization, big S, big R, and the big difference between those two, and what that really is pointing to, and the feelings that can come up within people, because it can, be challenging to feel lonely and alone and isolated from the rest of the world. In fact, actually, I've spent quite large parts of my life living on my own, so I know quite a lot about this from a direct experience, but also from the context of self-realization. And I wanted to just explore a little bit why feelings of isolation and loneliness can come up in the first place, and look at the root of that and point to a path beyond that, really, into a deeper awareness of who you really are. And so I'm going to do that to help explain that. For those of you who may or may not have been to my events, you'll know that I often bring along a fiber optic lamp, and I've got one here with me now. And just so you can see that a little bit better. Yeah, there it is. It's a fiber optic lamp. And it's a useful metaphor in the context of self-realization, because you probably can't see it on the screen because it's a bit too light with the daylight behind me, but the metaphor I often describe is that we can imagine ourselves as one of these points of light at the end of the fiber optic. They're blue. And most of us live most of our lives imagining that we're this single individual person in this form, and we're spending a lot of our lives looking outwards from the direction of the fiber, and everything else looks separate from us, including all the people. And when you look at the world like that, the world can be a pretty scary place, really, because everything is separate from you. And when you're isolated on your own, then it's very easy for feelings of separateness, loneliness, and isolation to come up, because we're looking at the world outwards, and everything appears distant and separate from us. And in these changing times, that's going to be accentuated very deeply for many people. And the reason that feels so challenging ultimately is it's because it's actually a case of mistaken identity. In truth, if I look at the rest of the fiber optic, and if we look downwards, and that's what the infinite silence and spheres of light meditation does, we see that all of the light has come from one source. And indeed, the power that drives that is the battery. And that is my metaphor for infinite awareness or infinite silence. But when we identify with the separate self, the point of light at the end, then automatically we're in a space of being separate. And we believe that that is ourselves, and our lives depend upon this form, when in ultimate truth, the whole universe, is connected and all comes from one source. And this light represents beingness, or what I call spheres of light, because that's how it emerged in the realization. And then the power behind, or before even beingness, the I am, the infinite I am, is this, the battery or infinite silence. The reason this feeling of isolation, separateness, and feelings of loneliness comes up is because of this belief that we are the body-mind complex. And that inevitably creates this feeling of separation, and is actually this also the source of fear. And actually, this single belief, the belief that one is the body-mind, is actually the fundamental block to spiritual self-realization, the realization that you are, in fact, the power or awareness that drives all of life. And this power, this awareness, is infinite, and hence the term infinite silence. And that is non-personal, and we are all that. And so when one identifies with the belief that one is the body-mind, the point of light at the end, inevitably there's a case of mistaken identity, and fear and separateness and isolation will come up. And that's accentuated by the conditioning that takes place in life. I am separate from you. I am a man, or woman, or this religion, that background, that believing, that nationality. All of this creates separation and accentuates this case of mistaken identity. The idea and the belief that we are the body-mind. And that single belief, as I say, is the fundamental block to spiritual self-realization, but it's also, as a result of that, the source of all suffering, the source of all suffering, that single belief. So it turns out the realization of the Buddha, the realization of the self, basically comes down to the dissolution of that single mistaken belief that one is the body-mind. And that is the pathway to the realization of the self, the realization, acceptance, and openness to that there is something greater, something higher that is beyond the body-mind. Now, if you were to, excuse me, just do a little exercise for those of you watching live. Now, maybe just do this. Just close your eyes for a moment and just ask inside the question, who am I? And just be with that for a moment. This question, who am I? And see what comes into your awareness with that question. And maybe you might want to share that on the comments thread here. I can see them coming up. You may get all sorts of answers to that question just by looking within and closing your eyes. I did that recently at a live event at Avalon, a new centre, and people came up with all sorts of things like their name, their job, their personhood, their form, whether they were a man or a woman, and so forth. But also, when other people started to touch something deeper. And so we then redid the exercise. Good, thank you for sharing that. It's actually not this experience. And so what I'd like to invite you to do now is close your eyes again and go within and ask the question in a slightly different way. And ask the question, who am I without memory? Who am I without memory? And just be with that for a moment. Who am I without memory? And again, if you want to share any of that, what came for you, whether it was a vision, an image, a picture, or nothing at all, feel free to pop that in the comments. Good, I'm glad that you got that, Elizabeth. I am nothing, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. Good, so thank you for sharing that, both Sachin and Elizabeth. So again, when I did this public event, different answers started to come, like I am nothing, I am love, stillness. These types of responses started to come. Now this is getting much closer to the truth or the realization of who we are. And the reason the without memory words are there is very important from a context of spiritual self-realization, is because we're living from this space of a memory. And that's where your suffering, all of the suffering comes from either living in the past or projecting from that past space into some future, rather than being simply here, present, now. So with this awareness, we can start to look a little bit more deeply and just notice something. So every thought, feeling, sensation that you have ever had, and I mean every thought, feeling, sensation that you have ever had, has arisen. So a thought might appear. Now, if you start to engage with a thought, you'll do what I call catch the train of thought. And that train of thought will take you to many stations, but none of them will be your truth. You'll just go off on some train of thought and go in all sorts of directions, many stations, but none of them ultimately will be fruitful in terms of who you really are. However, when you're stiller and calmer, you can also notice a thought arising like a wave. And if you don't engage with it, it will simply pass like a cloud and dissolve. The same is true of a feeling or an emotion. 1 minute that feeling or emotion is not there, and then next minute arises, and it is seen just like a thought. Now, if one believes that one is the feeling or the emotion, then it might hang around for quite a while. Certainly that can be the case with negative thoughts, feelings, sensations. But if one just simply watches, then this feeling, sensation, emotion will arise. Without identifying with it, it will pass like a wave, and it will merge back with the ocean. And all phenomena, thoughts, feelings, sensations, ideas, they're all like waves. They're all seen, and they all arise. And eventually, depending on the degree of engagement with them, they will all eventually pass. So the question comes, if you're not thoughts, you're not your feelings, you're not your emotions, what is it that can see or sense all of this phenomena? And that includes the phenomena of the body. What is it that is unchanging and sees all of these thoughts, feelings, sensations? Even the state I am, pure being, is seen by this. What is it then that notices and sees this? And that's why I asked you to do that exercise, closing your eyes and asking the question, who am I without memory? Because it leads us to realize that there's a deeper witness here that's noticing the arising of all phenomena. And ultimately, that witness is awareness. Awareness itself, that is untouched by the phenomena, the thought, the feeling, the sensation, the emotion. These are all like clouds that pass, but awareness is permanent, unchanging, unmoved, and untouched and unblemished by the passing waves of life, the thoughts, the feelings, and the emotions. It is awareness that sees all of these things arising, and it is awareness that sees them all passing. But if we believe that we are the feeling, the thought, the emotion, then we will struggle and it will hang around much longer. And that, as I'm sure we all know, is very challenging. So the invitation of self-realization or awareness is to come back to that witnessing space that sees the arising of all phenomena, whether it be a thought, a feeling, a sensation, and simply notice without judgment that it is there. And in that pure witnessing space, there's a recognition of a stillness and awareness that is moving and unchanging. And going back to the fiber optic lamp, down at the bottom here is the battery that powers the light, that powers the expression, which is the dot of light at the end. That awareness I've just been speaking about is like that battery. It sees everything in front of it. Everything appears in front of it. And an insight that came to me recently is that consciousness is like a green screen. You've all heard of the green screen in making movies. And the green screen, you can project anything onto it. And that's what it's like, a projection onto this screen of consciousness. But the awareness is there watching this projection always. But if we become identified with the projection on the screen, the thought, the feeling, the sensation, the emotion, then one inevitably is going to suffer. And what we're doing most of our lives is actually living from this belief that we are the body-mind, and the conditioning that's gone into that, and that's associated with the memory, hence why the question earlier, who am I without memory? And we started to get answers or responses to the ones that were posted there closer to the truth. And ultimately it is seen that one simply is awareness. And it is this realization, this experiential realization, that one is infinite awareness or infinite consciousness, that brings an end to the suffering. There's a story I understand from the Buddha 2,500 years ago, and he was being asked who he was. It had been recognized at the time that he had become enlightened, or self-realization had occurred. And the person asking the question used many different names for him. And he was saying no to all of them. And eventually, having run out of ideas, the person turned to the Buddha and said, "What are you then?" And his response was, "Awareness. I am awareness." And this awareness is infinite, unchanging, untouched, unmoved, perfect, whole, and complete. And the reason I was giving you those pointings or sharing that insight earlier about the arising of phenomena and the disappearance of phenomena is to show you that actually all of this that is appearing, including the body that we have, is actually impermanent. But there is a witness to that sees it all, that witnesses it all, that witnesses all the changes over time, the arising of the waves and the dissolution of the waves back into the ocean. And that is ultimately awareness. And going back to this original question around small s self-isolation versus big S, big R self-realization, we will move beyond the feelings of separateness, loneliness, and isolation by the recognition or the awareness and realization of that which is unchanging or permanent. Certainly in the Buddhist traditions, they talk about impermanence and permanence. And it is the permanence, the life eternal, the infinite consciousness, that is the unchanging, capital S, self. And it is this and this route alone that ultimately leads to the dissolution of the idea of separateness, loneliness, and moves one into the space of oneness, stillness, calmness, inner peace, love, grace, gratitude. It is this and this alone that dissolves the suffering. And so, in these challenging times, with an awareness or some insight and looking at life from a deeper perspective, if you find yourself in a space of feelings of isolation, loneliness, and so forth come up, this is not meant to be a challenge from life to you. What it actually is an invitation to look more deeply at what it is that has arisen. It's actually an invitation to move beyond this experience that is now occurring and be the witness to it. And in the pure witnessing, acceptance, and noticing, feeling, facing, and observing, you will find that naturally any phenomena, thought, feeling, sensation, emotion will pass. What will remain is the stillness, the awareness that is already there. I actually have a whole live stream dedicated to this process. It's called Live Stream 11 on my YouTube channel. So you might want to take a look at that. It's called Transmuting Fear into Love. So do consider having a look at that. That's pretty much all I wanted to sort of share today. I realise that for those new to this, this may seem mind-blowing or even weird. But just consider that a bit further. What is it that is unchanging and permanent within you? And you will find you don't need to believe me on this. It is ultimately a realization. And sometimes I say truth is unbelievable to make a little bit lightness from it. And what I mean by that, it's not a belief, it's a realization. So that's enough words today. And just like to finish with a brief meditation, just to bring you into a deeper space of awareness. So if you'd like to join, then simply close your eyes, whether you're sitting down or lying down, and just simply observe for a moment your body. Noticing all the sensations. Maybe there's some thoughts, just watching neutrally and silently. And as your eyes are closed and your attention is focused on the body, just be open from your heart to the experience of what I call spheres of light. And that on the fiber optic was the lamp or the light at the bottom. It's the pure state I am. And this is a non-personal and infinite I am. It's beingness. Pure being, just resting your attention on this state that can be sensed and witnessed, that I am, with nothing after the words I am. And then simply know that the mere fact that this state I am can be sensed or seen, it must be being seen from a deeper space. And I call this the silent witness in infinite silence. So just allow your attention to dissolve into and as this silent witness. There may still be sensations, feelings, I amness being watched neutrally and without judgment. All this is being seen or witnessed by the silent witness. Just allowing those phenomena on the green screen of consciousness to be watched like a movie, without judgment, without engagement, just simply witnessed or noticed. And even this silent witness is like a sliver of ice in an ocean. And the ice melts, dissolves. It becomes one with the ocean. And this ocean is awareness or infinite silence. Or as Elizabeth noted earlier, no thing or no thingness. It's infinite, this. Only things are finite. This awareness, this silent stillness, this infinite silence, everything, all of life emanates from this, just like the base of that fiber optic lamp, the power behind the universe. It is everywhere and in everything, touches everything, and everything arises. Every sound, every phenomena emerges from this and returns to this. This silent witnessing, allowing, trusting, accepting, embracing, dissolving deeper and deeper into this. Always you have been this. Never has there been a time when you were not this. And as I bring this brief meditation to a close, know that this awareness remains constant, ever present, here, now. And just allowing yourself to notice the body, and gently, when the time is right for you, opening your eyes and simply watching, trusting, accepting that which is here now. The awareness that is unchanging remains. Good. Good. And finally, just wanted to say that tonight at 8 p.m. UK time, so check your local time on timeanddate.com, on my page, so not on this personal profile, but on my page, Philip Wade, Infinite Silence, Self Realisation, I'll be doing a longer meditation, the longer version of the Infinite Silence meditation at 8 p.m. UK time. And I'll also be recording that and putting it on YouTube later. So if you'd like to join us, last night we had people from Australia, Malaysia, Italy, Romania, west coast of Canada, USA. So quite a global offering. So if you would like to join tonight, please do. And if anybody wants to ask any questions or add anything, please put them in the comments below. But other than that, in these times of great change, take care, do look after yourself, and maybe take the opportunity to meditate and look more deeply. I send you much love and many blessings. Namaste.